Hey everybody, how are you doing? This is Rob of Ro2R Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today I want to continue to talk about E3 because, as I've mentioned recently, it is right around the corner, and as I've also mentioned recently, quite a few times actually, it's a weird year, man. It is so strange not having Sony as a part of the show. And because of that, obviously EA continuing to step further and further away from E3, it just creates this weird sort of, I don't know, feeling. I don't want to say a cloud because that sounds negative, but this weird feeling kind of hovering over the convention. And we've also seen this be one of the quieter lead-ups to E3 in recent memory. I mean, I tweeted about this a few days ago. It just seems like there's not that much hype and anticipation, very low in the rumors and leaks leading into the show, which some could argue is actually a good thing, and in a lot of ways I agree with that. But overall, it's just a strange year. So one of the things I wanted to kind of dig into in this conversation about E3 is if E3 will turn out to be a little bit of a bust, or kind of more of a, I don't know, a slower, less exciting year, or if it will somehow actually turn out to be a great year, maybe one of the strongest E3s we've seen in a long time. There could certainly be a case to be made for both outcomes. But you know what? I'm just going to go out and say it. At the end of the day, I actually expect this to be a surprisingly pretty great year. Now again, I have to come back to this because I know I've brought it up a few times, but it is so relevant. The lack of Sony changes things in such a way that we probably should expect this to be a less exciting or a less monumental year, with less crazy announcements, knowing one of the three major console players isn't going to be there. And so we assume any PlayStation 4 exclusive games won't be there. Any reveals or discussions about the PlayStation 5 or next gen from Sony also not going to be a part of the show. And while that is very sad, and I'm depressed about that, and it should mean the show won't be great, I think it's going to secretly aid in the show being something kind of special. And the main reason is, building off of my last conversation about Microsoft at E3, I think that the lack of Sony is going to further push and convince Microsoft and Nintendo, although probably mostly Microsoft, to really come out guns blazing. Ultimately, what I'm getting at is I think that both Nintendo and Microsoft have a good shot at really coming out strong here. They're in very different positions, you know, Microsoft trying to make up lost ground with the Xbox One, a slowing library, slowing support, slowing sales for the Xbox One, but then also knowing that we have some sort of next-generation Xbox hardware around the corner definitely changes things a little bit. Nintendo, of course, releasing the Switch in the middle of the 8th generation, abandoning the Wii U earlier than a lot of people thought that they would have to, but still releasing a Nintendo Switch that has now become like the hottest selling game device on the planet, breaking crazy amounts of records, selling like hotcakes. Hardware is moving, or software is moving like nobody's business on the Nintendo Switch. We already know they have a really strong lineup going into 2019, and we know they're going to give us more surprises at E3. And so there's just a lot to kind of expect from these two companies, and it actually is getting me really excited for the show, aided by the fact that, like I mentioned, we haven't really heard a lot of leaks and rumors about anyone before the show. And I'm really, really excited about that. Focusing a little bit more on Microsoft, I think that, you know, building on what I've already kind of mentioned here, I think that Microsoft really is in the perfect position, even more so than Nintendo. You know, Nintendo, of course, being my favorite company and the Switch being my favorite device. When I look at Microsoft, they are the ones in the prime position here. Because as we know, while yes, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo do compete against each other, I've been beating that drum for a long time. I don't believe in this philosophy that Nintendo doesn't compete with them and vice versa. They do all compete together and play in the same sandbox. But more than that, Sony and Microsoft have really for a long time been more direct competition with each other than with Nintendo. So there's this weird sort of balance of they all play together, but Sony and Microsoft have really just had guns pointed at each other for the last 3 generations. And so losing that Sony and that possible PlayStation 5 and the reveals of Ghost of Tsushima and Death Stranding and stuff, removing that from E3 means Microsoft has a specific stage all to themselves. The whole E3 stage belongs to them and Nintendo, but the specific competing with next generation hardware reveals and in the same kind of space, that is where Microsoft has the ability to stand out. And so there's a chance that Microsoft maybe plays it safe and they play it kind of boring and they decide to just focus on some third-party titles that we know are coming to the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 or maybe the Switch. You know, they're going to focus on maybe Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. They're going to focus on Cyberpunk 2077 and whatever other games, you know, maybe we finally get the Grand Theft Auto 6 and so we hear about that. whatever the case, we're going to hear them talk about those kinds of games, and maybe they just focus on those and they don't really want to talk about the future. But again, my whole last video about Microsoft relied on this. I firmly believe that they are going to focus on the big next thing coming from Microsoft. I think they will be officially the first company to come out and truly talk about and showcase the next generation, their next hardware, the next Xbox to succeed the Xbox One, that will be the competitor to the PlayStation 5, and then whatever Nintendo eventually decides to release down the road as well. They're going to be the first ones of the major three to finally come out and show something. At least I believe there is a chance they could do that. And doing that at a year where they don't have Sony breathing down their necks, and we know Nintendo's going to be doing the Nintendo thing and also probably not giving us new hardware, and if they do, not next generation hardware, I think Microsoft really wants to take advantage of that. Of course, how they would do that, if they decide to do it, is the big question, because they could just give us a very tiny taste. They could give us just a morsel and like some CG pre-rendered kind of weird animations of just what the final next Xbox is supposed to look like, but then maybe also show us no gameplay, no controller, stuff like that. And that would be really disappointing. But they could kind of give us a pretty big peek behind the curtain. I mean, they really might show us this is the box. They might have it physically on stage. They might show us the controller, and they might even confirm a release window, a release year, and most excitingly, some games, which is where I would hope they would do something like confirm Halo Infinite to launch the thing, as I've talked about so many times. So Microsoft is in a really crazy position, and honestly, I don't expect the boring Microsoft. I'm expecting the exciting Microsoft. I'm expecting the Microsoft that wants to kind of stick it to Sony in a friendly competition way, not to be assholes. They want to stick it to Sony, they want to take advantage of this extra space and extra attention that they're going to have, and they want to be the first ones out of the gate to say, boom, here you go, this is the next Xbox, this is the next generation, we're ready to kick it off in style, and we are going to kill it for all these different reasons. Should maybe show off some of the titles that these, studios that they purchased are going to be making and revealing, and they could just give it to us, and I expect that, and it could make for an incredible showing from Microsoft. Now with Nintendo, it's a little bit trickier, and the reason I say Nintendo is tricky is because I think that they could do one of two different things with their showing at E3 this year. They could also play it safe and just give us a bunch of details about games that we already know about, which we've all discussed. I've mentioned it so many times on my videos, you guys know. They could give us all the info on Animal Crossing, more info on Fire Emblem, all this info on Luigi's Mansion. They could talk about Pokemon. They could show off some real stuff about Astral Chain, maybe do a blowout on Bayonetta 3 and confirm the release window, and that would all be phenomenal. I would absolutely love it because, some of those games are games I'm very excited for. I can't wait for Fire Emblem, Luigi's Mansion, Astral Chain, Bayonetta, stuff like that. Daemon X Machina, and there might even be another one I'm brain farting in there somewhere. They could really kind of just go ham into all of that stuff. Huge games that are going to be huge sellers that we're very excited about and that we already know about. Maybe even more into third-party stuff. Show off some Marvel Ultimate Alliance and some Doom Eternal. That would be really great. But that would also mean that there wouldn't be a whole lot of surprises. They might play it safe with just information about games we already know about. And great as those games are, that doesn't carry the same level of hype and, jumping up in your room and jumping off your couch and screaming and getting so excited. It doesn't carry some of that same weight. It's the surprises that we're hopefully looking for from Nintendo. And so, are they going to reveal something crazy? Are they going to reveal some crazy third-party announcement game that we just would never see coming? Are they going to show off some Metroid stuff like I talked about? Are they going to bring back Pikmin? Are they going to do any number of things I discussed on my recent videos about E3? Maybe. And if so, then they start to come out guns blazing, and they also start to say, hey, whether Sony is here or not, whether Microsoft shows off new hardware or not, we're here to show you not only do we have these amazing games for 2019 you've already seen, here's a couple of other huge ones that you had no idea about. And it could just be, I don't want to start going off into third-party territory because there's probably 20 different third-party titles I could announce that would be really, really exciting. A lot of you guys could probably picture what some of those would be as well, so that would be very huge. And I kind of expect a couple of surprises from Nintendo, man. I really do. It's why I spent half of my Nintendo video talking about those surprises, because I think that they are going to give us some great stuff. Now, another element to Nintendo is something I don't believe is going to happen, but I know a lot of you guys out there do believe is going to happen, and that's if Nintendo also decides to discuss new hardware. Of course, I'm talking about a Nintendo Switch Pro, a Nintendo Switch Mini, which has been all the rage for the last year, and I've talked about oh so many times. Very interesting stuff going on with the kind of stories and theories around the idea of new hardware from Nintendo coming out this year. And here's why I don't really believe we're going to see some of that. It's only okay, let me rephrase. Half of me thinks that maybe they're not making an upgraded version of the Nintendo Switch, and the other half of me that thinks that they are making it also believes that Nintendo wouldn't show that stuff at E3. For the most part, if I was to focus on the half of my brain that says, yeah, Nintendo probably is upgrading the Switch for 2019, that half of my brain says they're going to do it completely separate from E3. They're going to show it either in their own Nintendo Direct or, honestly, just a press release. To be fair, something like that could be like a 90-second trailer they put on YouTube and a press release they put out to all the main media outlets that says, hey, the new Nintendo Switch Pro with, these 4 new features and a little bit more horsepower and better frame rate. They'll just put that out there, and they could do that any day of the week, any month of the year, and it's big news and the message gets out there. Focusing on something that isn't next-generation hardware at E3 to me seems like a weird play for any company, and it would seem like a weird play for Nintendo. So if they're doing a Switch Mini or a Switch Pro, I think that doesn't make sense for E3. If this was the year where we would expect them to show their next-generation hardware, the successor to the Switch, then, yeah, there's a good shot that would happen at E3. So for all of you guys who are expecting the Switch Pros and the Switch Minis of the world to become a reality, and maybe you want it to show up at E3, I'm going to kind of be that naysayer and tell you I would not expect that to show up next month. And on top of that, then you start to look at all the third-party companies, and it just seems like it's going to be a great year for games all around. So much coming from, Ubisoft and Square and Capcom and, even EA, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, I'm very, very excited for. There's so many third-party games coming. I mean, I made a list of the games that I'm really excited for at E3, and a lot of those are third parties. So I think that whereas this year has that strange feeling hovering above it, like I said at the beginning here, with the lack of Sony and the lack of PlayStation news and information, no PlayStation games, no possibility of a PlayStation 5 discussion, it could seem like it's going to be a barren year, and that is possible. It's possible that with no Sony, both Nintendo and Microsoft decide to kind of step back, and they want to play it safe and say, hey, this year we don't have to come out guns blazing. We can take this extra time to sort of recoup and prepare some bigger surprises for the end of the year, and also for next year at E3 when Sony, theoretically comes back. But I just am an optimist, you guys, and even without Sony, I feel like Nintendo and Microsoft and these other companies with all the great games they're making, they're just going to give us a barrage of stuff. And so, in a weird twist of fate, I'm hoping and kind of expecting for this year to actually make up the lost ground of not having Sony and actually deliver possibly one of the best E3s we've seen in a long time. And like I said, that's even partly aided by the fact that we haven't seen a lot of leaks and rumors so far. Hopefully, I haven't jinxed it here by talking about it, so that in the next 2 weeks before the show, we don't all of a sudden start seeing all these leaks and rumors come out, because that would certainly be depressing. They become fun talking points, and I'll enjoy making videos discussing those leaks and rumors. And I'll try to not do what I've done in the past and put that information in titles, because I did do that last year, and I understand that that's a problem for people. So, but, I will talk about it if they happen, but I don't really want those things to happen. That ruins a lot of my own excitement, and of course it ruins a lot of the excitement for you guys. So we'll have to see how the next 2 weeks play out. I'm knocking on wood, man. I certainly hope that I haven't jinxed it here by talking about all that stuff. So who knows, man? E3 is right around the corner, and I'm not expecting a dud. I'm expecting something pretty exciting. Hopefully you guys feel the same. I mean, what are you expecting? Do you think that a lot of my ideas make sense, and Microsoft is going to come out swinging with the next generation, Nintendo's going to come out swinging with a bunch of surprises? Or is everyone going to kind of take a year off and just play it nice and safe and nice and cool, and just have a mild showing, and we'll have to wait for next year to really kind of be the big one? So whatever you guys think, discuss that below. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Ro2R Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.